2 months ago I revealed the best talent for weapon damage you can put on your weapon, but that was before the buffs to talents that has come with Seasons 2.0. So in this video I'm going to show you how the changes impact on the ranking of weapon talents, reveal the surprise talent that is challenging for the top place, and which talents you should be using. Now before I start, you might want to watch the original video, as I'm not going to run through each talent again. This was the ranking of talents before the changes, with Flatline sitting proudly on top due to its great 15% amplified damage, ease of use and utility across multiple weapons, with Killer and Strained coming in close behind. So what has changed with Seasons 2.0? These first three talents have all seen a significant buff in their damage output, but the problem with them was never the damage they delivered. They were, and still are, very clunky to use and difficult to get the most out of, and nothing has changed. I don't really get why Massive changed this talent. It already delivered top tier damage, and the limitations on it were more that it didn't address the slow reload times of shotguns, a bit like Pummel does. So this is a nice to have buff, but it doesn't change my overall rankings. Measured mixes additive and multiplicative damage modifiers in order to deliver a damage buff, something that many players just don't really understand. I went through this in my original video, so check out how it all works there. In simple terms, the buff will increase damage output in the first half of the magazine by around 14% and in the second half by 12%, so roughly an overall 13% damage buff, which is up from just over 8% previously. Not enough to change my ranking, but a nice buff to a good talent nonetheless. Just a very small change for Vindictive, so no change in its ranking. The next three talents have received significant damage buffs, to the extent that two of them, Eyeless and Thunderstrike, could in theory be almost S tier based talents. Can't put them there because of the limited ways in which they can be activated. Eyeless, for example, can only be activated by a blind of Firefly, a flashbang grenade, and by the talent itself after 4 kills, which means that the buff just won't be up much at a time. Similarly for Thunderstrike, which does have slightly more ways to proc it, with the Shocker Punch exotic holster, the exotic shotgun Scorpio and the exotic AR St. Elmo's. But the duration of shock is very short compared to other status effects, meaning that your build has to lean so far into status effects that it's just not worth it. Ignited is an easier talent to proc with the Burn Sticky Bomb, Incinerator Turret, the Fast Starter Chem Launcher and the exotic AR Iron Long, the exotic holster Imperial Dynasty, the Firewall Specialization Flamethrower, Incendiary Grenade, and of course the talent itself, but it received a smaller buff, so all of these three talents remain where they are on my ranking. Optimist is a massively overrated talent. While it's incredibly simple to use and can be used viably on every weapon, its buff is to additive weapon damage, and so it was lacking compared to other talents coming in at only 6.4% damage uplift. So the buff it got was welcome, but it only increases the damage uplift to about 7.5%. Still massively overrated. Ranger is an interesting buff in the context of Seasons 2.0 and the range modifiers that are coming in that increase damage when at longer ranges. Coupling it with this talent could be quite strong, but the buff isn't enough to improve its ranking compared to other talents. The next two talents are where it gets interesting. Firstly, Sadist. Sadist is a much easier talent to proc than the other status effect based talents because you have gear like Ongoing Directive and its hollow point ammo, which is pretty easy to keep up all the time. Ridgeway's Pride, the Stinger Hive, Seeker Mines and so on. So the fact that Sadist is getting a buff to 30% amplified weapon damage is huge and would make this the best talent in the game. Add in that Ongoing Directive is also getting a huge buff to 50% amplified weapon damage, and potentially we have a completely new meta arriving. So clearly Sadist is the best weapon damage talent in the game. Well, it would be if it weren't for the huge buff that Killer received. As I explained in my original video, Killer procs far more than you might expect it to, and this buff is only going to increase the likelihood that the buff is up. With the buff, weapon damage will be increased by 22%. Not as high as Sadist, but Killer is a talent that can be used on any build and any weapon. So which of these do I think is the best weapon damage talent? Without question, if you are happy to run a bleed build, and particularly the Ongoing Directive gear set, then Sadist is the best weapon damage talent in the game. But for everyone else, Killer is the way to go. Now, I did mention at the start a surprise talent that was challenging for the top. Well, this was the talent Perfect Allegro that you find on the named Aug assault rifle Invisible Hand. This talent increases rate of fire, which is a direct 1-for-1 damage increase, and in the PTS this was getting buffed to 22%. At the same time, the Aug assault rifle has received buffs, so that it's now one of the best sustained DPS assault rifles in the game. Sadly, in the final patch notes, Perfect Allegro has now only been increased to a 15% rate of fire buff, coupled with the fact that it is only available in its perfect version on one named item, and sadly I couldn't rate this talent better than a C tier now. For all my thoughts on Seasons 2.0 and what it means for the future of the Division 2, check out this video here.